Welcome to Backbone Unlimited. My name is Matt Hartsky. If you're not familiar with who I am, I've been hunting and guiding Western big game for over 34 years, and I've been a professional strength conditioning and nutrition coach for more than 30 years. And I'm here to help you become a more successful and consistent hunter, shed hunter, and outdoorsman. In this episode, we're talking about something most shed hunters don't want to admit. Shed hunting is a game of missed opportunities, and most of them happen quietly, not with a clear mistake you can point to and fix next time. They happen in the small decisions you don't think twice about. The moments you move instead of slowing down. The times you commit to a plan just a little too long. The times you second guess a change and stick with what feels safe. And at the end of the day, you don't feel like you failed. You just feel unsatisfied. You covered ground, you hunted good terrain, you didn't make any obvious mistakes, but something feels off. That feeling is the cost of missed opportunity. This episode isn't about tactics. It isn't about terrain features or timing windows or specific zones. Even that is all great information. This is a meta level episode. It's all about how shed hunts actually fail, how decision stacking ruins entire days without you realizing it, how to know when to stay versus when to move, and how to end a day knowing confidently that you hunted correctly even if you didn't find a single antler. This is a mindset episode, a judgment episode, and if you get this right, everything else starts working better when you're out shed hunting. Let's start with the uncomfortable truth. A lot of shed hunts don't fail because animals weren't there at the right time. They don't fail because shedding hadn't started. They don't fail because conditions were wrong. They fail because of a series of small, reasonable decisions that compound into the wrong outcome. No single decision kills the day. It just stacks. You start the morning with a plan. Your plan makes sense. You pick terrain that should work. You're confident enough to not question it immediately. That confidence is earned, and it's also dangerous. You walk into the first area. You don't see sheds right away. You don't see sign, tracks, beds, trails. Enough confirmation to justify staying a little longer. That's decision one. You keep moving through the area instead of stopping and shrinking your focus. You assume if sheds are there, you'll see them as you go. That assumption feels efficient. That's decision two. You notice subtle sign pulling slightly off the main slope into thicker cover, into awkward terrain, but it's harder to shed hunt, harder to see, and not part of your original plan. You tell yourself you'll check it later if needed. That's decision three. An hour passes, still no antlers. Doubt creeps in, but now you're invested. Leaving feels premature. Staying feels reasonable. So you split the difference and keep covering ground. That's decision four. By midday, you've committed half the day to a zone that never truly demanded that commitment. You didn't make a wrong decision. You made several unchallenged ones. That's how shed hunts fail quietly. There's no moment where you say, that was the mistake. There's just a slow drift away from opportunity. This is what I mean by decision stacking. Each decision makes sense in isolation, but together they lock you into a plan that quietly eliminates your best chances. Most shed hunters don't fail because they made bad decisions. They fail because they didn't reevaluate good ones soon enough. Shed hunting punishes indecision disguised as persistence. Now let's talk about why most shed hunts fail without obvious errors. In hunting, we're trained to look for clear feedback. An animal busts, wind shifts, pressure shows up. You know what went wrong. Shed hunting doesn't give you that clarity. There's no shot opportunity to miss, no animal to spook, no dramatic moment of failure. Instead, you just don't find anything. And because nothing clearly went wrong, you default to explanations that protect your ego. They must not have dropped yet. They probably moved out. Pressure ruined it. Wrong timing. Sometimes those expectations are probably true, but often they're placeholders for deeper issues. The real problem is usually this: you didn't hunt the highest probability behavior long enough, or you hunted low probability behavior for too long. And that brings us to one of the hardest skills in shed hunting: knowing when to stay and when to move. A lot of shed hunters get this backwards. They stay too long in places that feel productive and move too quickly through places that actually are. They linger in terrain that looks right and abandon terrain that feels uncomfortable. This happens because we confuse familiarity with probability. Familiar terrain feels safe, it feels correct. You know how to hunt it, you know what you're looking at. That comfort keeps you there longer than it should. Unfamiliar terrain, thick cover, awkward side hills, broken benches, those feel inefficient. It doesn't reward you immediately, so you move through it quickly or skip it entirely, and that's where the sheds often are. Knowing when to stay is not about effort, it's about signal. Stay when you see signs of repetition, stay when behavior overlaps, stay when movement is inefficient and looping, stay when bedding is reused in slightly different orientations. Move when sign is linear, move when movement is directional, move when the area only makes sense under narrow conditions. The mistake serious shed hunters make is staying because of hope instead of evidence. Hope sounds like this: this should work. This looks good. I just haven't hit the right spot yet. Evidence sounds like this: they were living here at the right time. They're stalling here and hanging out because of pressure or conditions. They're adjusting here, right? All of those things are what we're looking for at the time of the drop. If you can't articulate why an area deserves more time, it probably doesn't. Another quiet killer of shed hunts is hunting forward instead of hunting inward. Most people think shed hunting is about progressing through terrain as quickly as possible, moving from one area to the next, covering ground, advancing, and that's it. In reality, the most productive shed hunts often involve shrinking your world, not expanding it. You start broad, then collapse your focus. But most hunters never collapse. They keep moving forward because stopping feels like giving up momentum. They mistake motion for progress. Inward shed hunting means circling back, revisiting the same 100 yards from different angles, changing speed, changing perspective, letting the ground reveal patterns instead of forcing coverage. This feels inefficient to people who value productivity, but sheds don't care about productivity. They care about patience applied at the right moment. They don't care about anything, right? But we're framing that as if they did. Another reason shed hunts fail quietly is because hunters don't recognize when the best opportunity of the day already passed. This is hard to accept. You might walk through the best shedding zone at 9 a.m., not slow down enough, and never realize it. The rest of the day is spent chasing a feeling you can't quite recreate. By the time you stop and reassess, the opportunity is gone. That country is a couple miles back. Not because animals moved and you didn't find the sheds, but because you moved. This is why reflection during the hunt matters more than reflection after. Great shed hunters pause during the day and ask hard questions. If I were an animal about to drop my antlers, where would I want to be right now? What behavior am I actually seeing? Reacting to sign, or am I just dragging this plan forward? Those pauses prevent decision stacking. They reset judgment before it compounds. Another major source of missed opportunity is refusing to downgrade your expectations. This one is subtle and deeply human. It's hard to avoid. You show up expecting a big day, or at least a decent one. As the day unfolds and sheds don't appear, you keep chasing that expectation instead of adjusting your definition of success. You hunt harder instead of hunting smarter. Sometimes the correct move is to accept that today is not a high output day and you shift your goals. Maybe today is a confirmation day. Maybe it's a pattern checking day. Maybe it's a micro area learning day. A lot of times I just cover perimeters of areas, maybe a quick zigzag through the middle of them, and I get to check them off on X, right? If you cling to the idea that success only counts if you pick up antlers, you miss other wins and you push yourself into poor decisions late in the day. Some of the most productive shed seasons I've had were built on days where I didn't find antlers, but I learned exactly where not to waste time later or the next year. And that only happens if you're honest about what the day became. Now let's talk about how decision stacking ruins days specifically. Decision stacking usually follows this pattern. You commit early, you hesitate to change, you justify staying, you delay adaptation, and you run out of daylight. At no point does it feel wrong. It just feels heavy. The fix is not better discipline, it's earlier checkpoints. You need intentional moments where you reassess without emotion and you set your mental markers. If I haven't seen X by this time, I change my strategy. If sign doesn't evolve by this point, I move. If I don't see repetition of animals being here at the right time, I stop covering ground and start dissecting. These checkpoints are not rigid rules, they're guardrails against sunk cost thinking. Shed hunting punishes sunk cost brutally. Another underappreciated source of missed opportunity is end of the day fatigue. Late in the day, your judgment drops. Speed increases a lot of times. You're just walking through to get through and cover ground. Your attention narrows. You rush through terrain you would have hunted carefully in the morning. This is where a shocking number of sheds get missed. There can be a lot of antlers found even on the way back to the truck. I've found some of my best sheds on the way back to the truck by hitting one ridge over. It was probably walked by other guys on the way out, but they were already tired and they were moving through that terrain just to get back to the truck. Mentally, they've already packed it in before they're physically done. Great shed hunters reverse this. They save energy. They slow down late. They plan their final hours around precision, not just covering miles or getting somewhere. If you always end the day exhausted and empty-handed, it's worth asking whether your best judgment was already gone. Now let's address the most important question in this episode. How do you end a day knowing you hunted correctly even if you didn't find antlers? This is the mindset shift that separates confident shed hunters from frustrated ones. You hunted correctly if you can clearly answer these questions. Did I hunt behavior, not hope? Was I hunting the animal behavior where they would have likely been at the time that they should have been dropping? Did I adapt when evidence changed, evidence of the animals being there at the right time? Did I slow down in high probability areas? Did I move on from low probability areas without ego and worrying about it? Did I understand why I stayed and why I left? If you can answer yes to those, the day was more successful regardless of antlers because you know exactly what you're doing. If you can't, the day was expensive, even if you found bone, right? Because you weren't hunting it exactly on purpose. That's a hard truth, but it builds long-term consistency. Shed hunting is not about forcing outcomes. It's about stacking correct decisions. When you focus on decision quality instead of outcome, missed opportunities become lessons instead of regrets. And here's the final piece most shed hunters never hear. Missed opportunities are not failures. They're information if you're paying attention. Every time you leave an area too early, you learn something about your patience. Every time you stay too long, you learn something about your attachment to a plan that might be failing. Every empty day teaches you something about your assumptions, about the area, about how you need to scout the animals around the time that they're dropping. The problem is a lot of shed hunters numb that information with excuses like they'll pass over this episode. They blame conditions, they blame pressure, they blame timing. Rarely do they say, my decisions were slightly off today. That honesty is uncomfortable, but it's also transformative. Shed hunting rewards thinkers who are willing to audit themselves. That's why this episode matters. If you fix decision stacking, everything else improves. Your timing gets better, your terrain reads are going to sharpen, your confidence is going to stabilize, you stop chasing perfect days and start building correct ones, and over time, correct days stack up into consistent success. If you're serious about sharpening this kind of judgment, that's exactly why I built Team Backbone. It's more than just a membership. It's an inner circle for hunters who want to think clearer, make better decisions, and develop confidence that doesn't depend on luck. Inside, you're going to get 20% off site-wide on all Backbone Unlimited gear, the option to have a t-shirt shipped to your door every month, full access to the digital content vault packed with guides, checklists, and backcountry strategies, a private Facebook group with direct access to me and a community of driven hunters, direct call, text, or email access to me for personalized advice and automatic entry into monthly gear giveaways. This is built for hunters who care more about doing things right than just getting lucky now and then. Thanks for being here. I appreciate each of you. Until next time, train harder, hunt smarter, and never settle.